Hi, this is Lenny. You're on the air. Who we talking to? Where you calling from?
Hi, Lenny. This is Bob Johnson from Kenosha.
I read your, thank you, Alderman Johnson, 16th District, running for mayor, one of the two mayoral candidates, the other one being former mayor John Anaramian. I have to give you the backstory of this. I read the email you sent me on the air this morning.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I'm aware of that. Your listeners have been sending me endless numbers of messages, so you've got a loyal group of followers.
oh, plenty, believe me. A lot more than people realize. But anyway, what happened, just a backstory, I inadvertently got it. I had been in dialogue with Senator Johnson, another Johnson, Ron Johnson, to be on the air with us again next week. And I'm not going to pass up an interview with a senator. I don't care what party he's in. So, but I was looking for the response, and I couldn't find the email response. I had seen it, and it was in my trash, in my
Oh,
email trash, and that's where I found yours. Now, I'm not saying that that's where it belonged or anything, but somehow, and you know how it is sometimes.
well,
Some things go to spam, some things go to whatever. But luckily,
my feelings aren't hurt.
good,
That's
good.
what that's where most people funnel their city of Kenosha alderman emails.
Yeah.
Trash.
Well, it just and again, it's not like I can say it's not a harbinger of what it is or what, but I want to go back to what you filed a formal complaint
Correct.
against John Anaramian.
Well, against Emerging Communities Corporation,
All right,
he's listed as the principal.
okay, is he the sole? He's the sole proprietor.
Yes,
Is it a corporation? You said it's a
he's
corporation.
he's listed as the principal. The information I have is publicly available. I've got it through a small business online depository, Monta.
Would I be right in assuming that he might be the only employee?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that's an accurate
Yeah,
observation.
I would think that would be too. I mean, Mr. Anaramian knows politics backwards and forwards. You got to give him that.
Sure.
So, what exactly, Alderman Johnson, uh, got you to energize you? I'm looking for the words here. To go and file a formal complaint because now, and this is with the district attorney's office now. Formal complaint. You filed the paperwork, obviously, and I'm sure you've got your T's crossed and your I's dotted.
Correct.
And now it's in the district. It's in District Attorney Zaff's hands whether or not he's going to move forward with this or say no or let it set there. So, but what exactly was the impetus for you to do this?
Well, as you mentioned, I am a candidate for mayor, and one of the things that I've been talking a lot about is that the city of Kenosha is over $200 million in debt, and we've had a lot of interesting spending priorities over the last 20 plus years. And as part of my platform, I'm looking to reduce that debt by over half, and that's not going to be an easy task. So I actually started looking into ways where we could reduce unnecessary expenses, and some of the consulting fees that we paid over the last X number of years have accumulated and have had a meaningful impact on that total spend. Well, along the way, I noticed that Emerging Communities Corporation had been receiving payments since 2010, totaling $158,000, and that's really what piqued my interest. So I started to explore the reasoning behind the compensation because I had been operating under the impression that Emerging Communities Corporation was an environmental consulting firm. I learned that they are not an environmental consulting firm, and that's really what prompted all of the investigation, which then led me.
Investigation by you.
Yeah, I
Okay.
started filing a number of open records requests. I started having discussions with administration to really try and better understand why did we spend $158,000 on somebody who isn't actually qualified to do any brownfield work, at which point they disclosed that he wasn't hired to be a brownfield consultant. That was news to me because I've actually been involved in reviewing his contract and was operating under that information, which was bad information.
Isn't John Anaramian the principal? How can I say this? Advisor or whatever you went with the Chrysler cleanup?
Well, that was my understanding. That's also been the understanding of everybody I talked to across the city, that he's really been the guy that's the point person. But that's just simply inaccurate.
Okay, so who is?
Well, we hired a consulting firm called 8Ecom, and they do carry the credentials to do all the necessary work on the brownfield site. And here's the important piece of this. The state law, it's by state law that requires that people who do any environmental remediation work on that brownfield site have to carry necessary credentials. And I assumed, wrongfully so, that Emerging Communities Corporation had those credentials because I was led to believe, like I think the rest of the city was, that John Antimiranian through ECC was the guy running point on this. And in his contract, it talks about him providing analysis. Well, if he was providing any analysis, he was breaking the law. And that's what I brought to administration. And they quickly said, no, he never did any analysis. Which well, we paid him according to our contract. That's what we were paying him to do. And then they started backpedaling. So, I really decided to let the public determine, draw their own conclusions on whether or not they think that this was a deal that was appropriate or if it was a deal that was inappropriate. But I'm arguing that regardless of whether or not it was a bad buy on the administration's part, that Emerging Community Corporation was not able to participate by nature of their role on the study group.
But what the other thing I'm looking at here, to correct me if I'm just repeating what you said, is that John Antimiranian sat on the bid board. In other words, the board that was accepting bids for contracts.
Well, they're part of the rules writing. There's a group called the Brownfield Study Group, and they were created through legislation. So in 1997, I won't go into all the boring details, but they're a group that's been tasked with and been publicized as being involved intimately with the rules writing of grants and other parts of the DNR's remediation and redevelopment programs. And he chairs the Financial Issues Committee, which is where the conflict of interest
while
comes
he's
in and
bidding on the projects.
While he's bidding on a public contract, he's participating in the rules writing portion of it from the state's perspective. That's against the law. It's a Class C felony.
What does a Class C felony carry as a maximum penalty?
Well, I'm unsure of that. I'm mostly interested in recovering the money on behalf of the city of Kenosha taxpayers. I mean, the DA will have to determine what the penalty is, but I know that the civil side of it is that we were able to recover 2 times what the courts determined was unlawfully procured through his. In the event they determined that through his public position as chair for the Financial Issues Committee, violated the state law by then entering into a contract with which he had a private interest. In other words, pocketing $158,000. Should they choose that is in fact a violation of the law, we'll have the ability to recover that $158,000 times 2, which is really what I'm hoping that the city will do, because this isn't Mr. Antimiranian's first rodeo. In 1991, he was asked to speak in front of the Ethics Committee for trying to buy an ownership stake into the dog track. This back in 1991, and his defense was, I had no idea this was against the law. Well, this is the second case where he's involved in a committee that has oversight for something that he's benefiting from personally. And, this is the type of thing that not only the city of Kenosha, not only the state of Wisconsin, but the entire nation is just sick of. This ridiculous, all these backdoor shady deals. And, I'm going to let the city decide for themselves whether or not they think this was a sweetheart deal or whatnot. Maybe it was a case of bad buying decision on the part of the current administration. But I can tell you,
is anybody in the current administration, Mr. Bosman, Mr. Passetti, or any of the aldermen, could any of this run down on, trickle down onto them at all? Are there any? Or are they just basically free and clear of everything?
Well, like most things with municipal decisions, we have immunity for lots of reasons. But actually, in the statute that I believe was violated, there's an element in there that says if the contract was entered into in violation of it's under the bribery and misconduct subchapters in Wisconsin statutes, that the contract is null and void. So we would have immunity. The contract would be null and void. We wouldn't be obligated to anything else. But as I said in my email, it wasn't just the $158,000 that he pocketed in grant money. We just sent the guy to an all-expense-paid trip to Washington, D.C. For what? We don't know. The invoices don't tell us. Nobody can really give me any details.
How much was that?
I don't recall the actual figure, but it was typical hotel stay, airfare, food, per diem expenses. But we have no documentation. I, as a person from the public, an alderman, City of Kenosha taxpayer, wanted to know, well, what value did we get for paying for that quote-unquote trip? And none of that information is available. So part of my complaint to the district attorney's office was, we're at a point in time in history where the public has the right to scrutinize use of taxpayer dollars. We don't have the documentation, and that denies the public its inherent right to scrutinize the use of taxpayer dollars. Whether it was a mistake, whether it's gross negligence, or heck, even if it's criminal fraud, every dollar we spend should be subject to unprecedented levels of transparency. If there's no accountability when there's no detail, and I'm pursuing a remedy on behalf of the taxpayers.
If people are wondering about a Class C felony, just to clarify this, Class C felonies are generally regarded as the least serious of felony charges, and depending on the state, a Class C felony may involve fines for the convicted as well as jail sentence. In Wisconsin, Class C felony fines are often limited to $50,000 per conviction. The level of fine, if any, is typically determined by the individual case and circumstances. Now, Alderman Johnson, you filed the formal complaint. There's no time element on this. This does not have to be resolved before the general election, correct?
That's correct. I mean, I would be disappointed if we weren't able to see resolution prior to the general election. But, ultimately, I'm acting as a concerned member of City Council and a member of the Finance Committee with use of our taxpayer dollars. I'm going to lean on the District Attorney's Office to get a response, but they've got a lot of other things that they're working through. I don't know where this is going to fall in line with their priorities or their available resources. Ultimately, that's for them to decide. It's my job to make sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, and in this case, we have somebody who pocketed $158,000 of grant money who wasn't qualified to be doing the work that they were contracted to do, and we could have gotten away without spending that money, and that's where my problem is.
How aggressive are you going to be in seeing resolution to this? You filed the formal complaint. Are there any sort of legal type of follow-ups? In other words, any more paperwork you file, or is this it? Now you sit and wait. Will you sit and wait, or will you be very vocal about this? More vocal than you are right now, obviously.
Yeah, I'm going to be pleasantly persistent. I think when you're talking, if you look at it, is $158,000 in the grand scheme of our total expenses for the city a big deal? No. It is principle. It really is an issue driven by principle. And, let's not forget that this is a guy who's hoping that the city of Kenosha will hire him to be mayor again. And yet he's engaging in activity while he's pursuing that request, which I think is a violation of Wisconsin's both lobbying law and the bribery and official misconduct law. So I don't know how anybody could at that point think that this is somebody who has the integrity to serve our city in a meaningful way. This isn't his first rodeo. That's part B. Right now, I'm functioning as a City of Kenosha alderman and a member of finance who's concerned about the city spending $158,000 with no documentation. That bothers me.
Alderman Johnson, I want to thank you for the clarification again and the email. You also said that you're going to aggressively pursue other media outlets. I'm sure the Kenosha News will be one of them, but also Milwaukee outlets.
Yeah, and the reason behind that is that administration had shared with me after I pointed out the fact that he doesn't have the necessary credentials to provide any analysis, that in defense of their hiring decision, I should say, pointed out that he was hired to leverage, and this is public record, leverage his relationships with state and federal agencies. If that is true, if he is leveraging state and federal agency relationships, then the folks who are handing out those grants or awarding those grants based on quote-unquote leveraged relationships should be investigated as well, because this is taxpayers' dollars we're using. And the people are sick. They're absolutely fed up with this idea that only the insiders can win in this game. We need to bring some balance back to the table. And if there's people that are handing out tens of millions of dollars to their buddies instead of applying it to projects that have the most merit, well, then I think there are statewide implications, and that's why the Milwaukee media is interested.
Alderman Johnson, thank you very much. And keep us posted on any updates on this issue, okay?